Hey, Blockade, did you get Resident Evil 4?
Yeah, of course I got Resident Evil 4.
No, not that one. The newest one.
Oh, the newest one.
No, not that one. The brand new one.
Oh, the brand new one that came out on current gen consoles.
Yes, that one. Oh, my God. I swear to God, the remake, you idiot.
Oh, the remake. Why didn't you just say so? Sorry for the confusion, guys. I mean, there are a lot of copies of Resident Evil 4 out there, so of course I was going to make a mistake sometime. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Blockade Who Games, and today I've beaten yet another game, and I have some thoughts that I'm ready to share. Today we're going to be talking about the Resident Evil 4 remake. The original Resident Evil 4 released back in 2005, and since it has been put on every platform that will possibly run it. Hell, it even has a VR version released for the Quest not too long ago. Resident Evil 4 at the time of its release reimagined the franchise and was highly acclaimed for its story, gameplay, voice acting, and so much more, and often was referred to as one of the best video games ever made. Resident Evil 4, in my opinion, is responsible for the evolution of survival horror and third-person games, as the over-the-shoulder third-person view has had an increase in popularity from Resident Evil 4's release. Resident Evil 4 helped influence in many ways games such as Dead Space, The Evil Within, and The Last of Us. When it comes to Resident Evil 4's remake, I truly believe that I have played the best remake ever made. Not only is it one of the greatest video game remakes, but it's one of the best games I have ever played. It took a game that already felt perfect and managed to recreate that same magic all over again. The Resident Evil 4 remake is not a copy and paste with updated visuals. Resident Evil 4 remake keeps all the things that worked in the original and added new combat mechanics, a tenser atmosphere, side quests, and improved character designs and backgrounds, and so much more. The Resident Evil 4 remake did one thing right from the beginning by not changing the beloved story of the original. For many of us playing through the Resident Evil 4 remake and having experienced the original, the one concern we had was that they would change the story. The overall story, thankfully, is unchanged. If you're unfamiliar with Resident Evil 4, the story is a rescue mission starring Leon, the protagonist of Resident Evil 2, has grown up some since being a rookie cop and is now a special forces agent for the president. Leon is tasked with saving the president's daughter, who was kidnapped by a Spanish cult run by Sadler, who is using a plague called Plagas that controls the minds of the villagers in a small Spanish village to do his bidding, and Leon and Ashley are infected with that same plague and are on a time limit to get a cure. Every minute of Resident Evil 4's remake is a heart-racing experience that throws you curveballs around every corner, from a giant sea monster to trolls, hordes of villagers, a blind version of Wolverine, the Undertaker from WWE, and the ever-growing parasite that is the Las Plagas, which looks so good on the PS5, mind you, and the remake truly has enhanced the game's experience 100%. One of the best improvements to come out of the story and gameplay as well is the rehaul to the third act of the game that truly feels more cohesive compared to its original and builds up to a fantastic final boss fight that requires some hard work to finish. Not to mention that minor improvements have been made to every boss battle in the game, including the Garador, Mendez, Krauser, and many more. Though it remains familiar to the original, additional fights and story sequences improve the boss battles significantly. An example of this would be found with the fight with Mendez. Originally, you go to a barn and you just kind of get into this boss fight with him after going through several areas beforehand. But in this, there is a sequence that has been added to the very beginning of this where you're being chased by him and you have to run away from him while also dodging enemies to make your way across the map without getting caught. Then, from there, you wind up at what's called the Slaughterhouse, where you actually have the boss battle with Mendez. And the overall boss battle itself is unchanged, and the majority of what you do in that fight is the same, but the visuals provide a more unique and horrifying experience. The majority of the story is untouched, and that is a good thing. Nothing had to be changed, and adding new sequences and new cutscenes and gameplay features was just an appreciation to the game that improved the overall story, but thank God it did not ruin it, because the story is what made Resident Evil 4 so beautiful. From the start of Resident Evil 4 Remake to the beginning of the credits, the setting showcased why it was the true star of this game. Yes, the story and gameplay are a major part of why this is a great game, but the atmosphere and set design is truly a one-of-a-kind experience that in every way is an improvement to the original game. Every level of Resident Evil 4 Remake is a darker and grittier version than you will remember from the previous game. And because of the darker and more horrifying atmosphere, you feel uneasy and potentially in danger at all times. The level design for Resident Evil 4 Remake has also been altered to look familiar yet completely reimagined. These reimagined areas add more depth to the game as environments do not feel as bland or easy to look over. There's more focus on creating a larger world to explore and unique puzzles to complete that were previously not there. Not only has the world been reimagined, but some of the character designs have been improved to look more realistic and fit with the Remake series aesthetic. Leon and Ashley's designs have been improved, but also some of the major enemies that you will face along the way have been given their own redesigns as well. By far, though, the world around you is the greatest improvement, as Resident Evil 4 already had a beautiful world design, but the remake truly is a masterpiece all the way through. The atmosphere was not only improved on by the design of the environments and the different levels such as the village, castle, etc., but they are also introduced a more terrifying and anxiety-inducing audio design that is effective in bringing dread to the player as you hear manic cultist chatter from villagers, the sound of a beast within a dungeon, the wind moving the leaves around you in the maze, or the terrifying sound of chainsaw motors. All of this edging you closer and closer to the end of your seat and giving you one hell of an adrenaline rush. Even if you're not a fan of this series, you can appreciate the gorgeous design of the world and the terrifying atmosphere. This is one change made for the remake that I personally did not imagine being that big of a deal, but when you play Resident Evil 4 Remake, you cannot help but get lost in this game's world just with the looks alone, constantly pushing me wanting to see what the next area brings for me.
A most warm welcome to my castle. Such a pleasure to finally make your acquaintance, Mr. Kennedy.
Who the hell are you?
Resident Evil 4 Remake is a nostalgia road trip that brings me back to my childhood, as well as surprises me along the way with an entirely new territory to explore. From the opening cutscene of the game, it was made clear that I was in for a completely different Resident Evil than I remember. As we mentioned already, the horror atmosphere and elements generally have taken a front seat in this remake, as they incorporate darker environments that require more use of the flashlight, as well as making the enemies you encounter more intimidating at times. The gameplay for the Resident Evil 4 Remake series has been consistent, and not much has changed overall for the gameplay of Resident Evil 4 compared to the other remakes. Resident Evil 4 plays like a 2023 game, using the simultaneous twin-stick movement, allowing you to target an enemy while backing away for your safety, or stepping out of the way for an incoming crossbow bolt. Not to mention the fun of blowing out kneecaps of your enemies, leaving them exposed for melee finishers, or blowing the heads off of enemies, which is just gruesome. If you played the original, you will know that the quality of life updates to Resident Evil 4 Remake have truly improved the gameplay experience. Even the little things, such as being able to press one button to smash boxes and barrels instead of having to line up a knife swing, or switching weapons instantly by mapping it to the D-pad instead of pausing to enter the inventory screen. These updates allow for a seamless gameplay experience that does not feel cluttered. Not to mention the addition of parrying using the knife that makes the instant responses to melee attacks so much more enjoyable. Then of course the addition of silent kills using the crouching ability so you can sneak up on enemies and knife them from behind. These overhauls to the control setup makes the game flow so easily, and every change from the original improved the experience. Knives can break and requires being fixed as well, which I think is a added feature that adds some survival horror to it, as you have to be cautious of what you do with the knives. The player mechanics are not the only thing that have been changed, but the enemies have also become more aggressive and tend to quickly overwhelm you in numbers, but the game also switches out numerous enemy types across your playthrough for the sake of creating great pacing. Just when you feel comfortable, you are hit with enemies with different damage styles, shields, helmets, and of course specialty enemy types like the chainsaw villagers, wolves, and the Minotaur man who wields a sledgehammer, which is by far my favorite new enemy. This new enemy threw me off right at the start, and man, I was in love with his design and his intimidating fighting style. Then of course there is the chance for enemies, when their heads explode, to alter to these mutated villagers that become a different problem all on its own. It is easy to become overwhelmed and taken down by enemies, but the addition of checkpoint saves help with not having to backtrack so much, which was an annoyance with the original Resident Evil 4. Other major overhauls to the gameplay for Resident Evil 4 Remake includes removing the QTE events and replacing it with parrying and counterattacks, as well as removing the need to heal Ashley when she is downed, saving you on wasting materials. And then, of course, there was more exploration added to the lake area of the game, as you were able to dock at differing locations and complete side quests, additional puzzles, and find other hidden horrors lying within the world. And I genuinely want to thank the developers of Resident Evil 4 Remake for improving Ashley's overall gameplay side of things, as she previously was a headache-inducing part of the game that never failed to give me a migraine. They have improved her AI to be more considerate of her surroundings and not run right into mobs of enemies, as well as giving you the ability to keep her close or spread out during combat. She still gives me a headache, but they have made her less of an annoyance, and as a longtime fan of the series, it's appreciated. I feel like I can go on and on about this game's gameplay, but one last thing that I felt was important to mention was the changes made to the merchant and the addition of side quests. The merchant is a big part of Resident Evil 4 Remake, as he helps with crafting new recipes for ammo, trading in treasures for money, the ability to complete side quests that range from shooting blue medallions to tracking down a rare golden egg, and so much more. These quests are like bounties that are completed for rewards by the merchant that can be used to trade in for unique items and upgrades. Also, the merchant provides you with a new weapon to Resident Evil 4 Remake called the Bolt Thrower that allows you to use reusable bolts and comes in handy early on when struggling for ammo. The merchant is a staple character for the original, and seeing his charming face once again brings me back to my childhood, and thankfully he has remained relatively unchanged from his original counterpart. When it comes to my time with Resident Evil 4 Remake, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that I enjoyed every heart-racing moment of this game. The familiarity and new additions to Resident Evil 4 Remake have demonstrated that remaking a video game does not have to be a copy and paste with visual improvements. The Resident Evil 4 Remake has set the new standard for what a video game remake should be. Remakes should aim to bring older games to a new audience that respects what came before but breathes new life into it. I spent roughly 20 plus hours playing Resident Evil 4 Remake since it launched last Friday, and I am far from done playing this game, because even though I'm aware that the trophies are difficult to get, I plan to get the platinum. 20 hours for me was just playing through the main story, completing all side quests, and getting all collectibles. For the platinum, you are looking at 4 or 5 more playthroughs, as you will have to beat it on several harder difficulties and not use certain weapons, healing, etc. It is definitely going to be a difficult journey to platinum this game, but I am having so much fun that I am not ready to end my time with Resident Evil 4 just yet. Resident Evil 4 Remake is a familiar journey that is full of so many surprises that gives a veteran player like myself the feeling of replaying Resident Evil 4 Remake for the first time. I have always wanted to know what it was like to replay a game I loved again for the first time, and this is the closest I will ever get to that. Resident Evil 4 Remake is truly the perfect game. If you liked today's video, please subscribe to the channel, because I make video game content like this every single week. I also have a playlist listed below of all of the video games that I've beaten so far, so if you guys want to check out a bunch of the other games I've beaten, the playlist will help you, because I've beaten a pretty good amount of games so far this year. Now I want to turn it over to you guys. Now that Resident Evil 4 Remake has been released and completely done at this point, maybe a few DLCs potentially, what remake do you want to see them do next in the Resident Evil series? I personally believe that we're going to be heading in the same direction that they already are going in with a Resident Evil 5 remake, but they could always surprise us with other remakes along the way, rather the first game, Code Veronica, and so on and so forth. But I want to know what you guys think below, what video game from the Resident Evil series you want to see remade next. Well guys, that is all for today's video. I'm going to get back to playing some more Resident Evil 4, because that game is not going to platinum itself. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.